I think wind and renewables, all in all, are going to play a pivotal role, a crucial role, if you want. I think there's no other sort of solution or other power source that could meet the future demand that Sweden is projected to have.
Hello, and welcome back to the Onshore Perspective, Wind Europe's podcast, where we zoom in on what's happening in onshore wind across Europe and how national policies are shaping the sector's future. Today, we're heading north to Sweden, a country known for ABBA, IKEA, and clean power, and plenty of it, including onshore wind. To unpack what's going on and what could change next, I'm joined by Anton Johansson, Head of Analytics and Market at Green Power Sweden. Anton, great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Giuseppe. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Right. Let's start by setting the scene for listeners who may not follow Sweden power market closely. Anton, can you walk us through Sweden's current electricity mix today and where onshore wind fits into that picture?
Of course, and certainly. I mean, I would start by describing the electricity mix in Sweden as very diverse. So we have quite a lot of different power sources, and I think onshore wind slots in very nicely in the electricity system. So we pretty much have no offshore as of right now, just a small amount, but onshore represents about a fourth of the total generation on an annual basis. And then we have roughly the same amount for nuclear and 40% roughly is hydro. The rest is divided among solar and thermal, pretty much.
Got it. And just to put also things in context, those 18 gigawatts of onshore wind capacity that are installed in Sweden make the country the fourth largest onshore wind market in Europe after Germany, Spain, and France. So on paper, this sounds like a success story, but I've had the privilege to regularly speak with you over the past year, and you've been quite clear that conditions for onshore wind have deteriorated. So let's unpack why. Let's start with electricity prices, because you've often highlighted extreme low power prices as one of the biggest challenges for wind farm operators in Sweden. Now, for some listeners, low prices may sound like a good problem to have, right? I mean, who doesn't love a bargain? So, Anton, could you explain one, why are prices so low in Sweden? And two, what makes in practice for onshore wind developers and operators this an issue?
Well, let me start by or preface what I'm saying with the fact that, as you mentioned, a low electricity price isn't necessarily a bad thing. It offers good competitive edge compared to other countries for electricity intense businesses. However, the pricing in Sweden is pretty far removed from the rest of Europe. For anyone that doesn't know, Sweden is divided into four bidding zones. And I think all four of these are within the, say, top five or top six of the lowest electricity prices in Europe. So just to set the stage for how low the electricity pricing actually is. The issue with it is pretty much down to basic economics. So we have an oversupply in Sweden. We roughly produce 160 terawatt hours and consume only about 130. So the oversupply pushes the equilibrium pricing down quite a lot, and to the point where sort of new investments in the sector is kind of hard to motivate with the current pricing levels. So I would say that is sort of the current stage for the electricity market in Sweden. Albeit, as you mentioned, a low price isn't necessarily bad, but we need a pricing level where you can sustain long-term investments.
Understood. And so structurally low prices, in fact, among the lowest across Europe. But what are the reasons for these extremely low prices, if you could explain?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, we have a large oversupply, and I would say that's in part due to sort of a delayed electrification on the consumer side of things. So we have quite a large fleet of say industry projects that are meant to be large consumers of electricity, but they have sort of been delayed or postponed. So that has sort of pretty much, well, it has meant that the oversupply has become a real issue at hand, and the effects that it has on the equilibrium prices. Uh,
Yeah, you mentioned some projects that have been postponed or even canceled. Could you mention a few?
Well, I mean, a clear one that has gathered some international notoriety is the Northvolt project, which was a
Mm,
battery factory in the north of Sweden, which unfortunately went bankrupt. But they have some new investors now, so I'm thrilled to see how that project unfolds. But just to exemplify, we have a dozen of these projects, and Northvolt had announced an annual electricity consumption of about 2 terawatt hours. So just
wow,
to garner the scale of these projects, they're massive.
understood. So if we step back, we have a situation where electricity demand isn't growing as fast as expected, and it's pushing down prices. And at the same time, Sweden doesn't have a revenue stabilizing mechanism for wind farms like two-sided contracts for difference. So that makes it very difficult to justify new investments under current market conditions. And yet, Sweden has a very ambitious electrification plan, and this entails 300 terawatts of consumption by 2045, which is almost double the current consumption that you mentioned. So, what is the role that wind will have to play here?
Well, I think the general consensus is that renewables as a whole is going to play a crucial role in this, and the onshore wind plays a huge part when you're talking about sort of renewables. So I think its importance will only grow with time due to the sort of immense plans of electrification. I see no other answer to what sort of power source could meet the future demand of Sweden.
Mhm. Understood. And also, maybe let's just add a little bit of a EU perspective. Sweden National Energy and Climate Plan states sort of the trajectory for onshore wind, and we have calculated it that corresponds to pretty much 26, 27 gigawatts of onshore wind capacity installed by 2030, up from 18 today. But our latest forecast for Sweden suggests that only 2021 gigawatts will be realized under current conditions. So these gaps suggest a policy issue, and therefore I would like to pivot to the government action. The current Swedish government has been in power for about 3 years, and let's just start with the elephant in the room: nuclear power. I mean, the government appears to be very committed to building new nuclear. So, Anton, could you walk us through what the government is proposing and how it plans to support nuclear economically?
Yeah, and yet again, let me preface my answer by saying that we as an organization are not necessarily against nuclear or
Mm.
nuclear being established in Sweden. However, the sort of current plans for new nuclear with the financing options, for a lack of a better word, is bonkers. I mean, the government has proposed a very beneficial plan for loans. So, and they have also proposed a CFD, strike price that as at first, sort of the first draft was very far removed from the current spot prices. So, the sort of plans for new nuclear are kind of turning the competitiveness of the Swedish market on its head. So no other power source could reasonably compete with what the new nuclear plans are sort of suggesting. So that's our issue with it. We just think that it might not be socially beneficial. The costs pretty much outweigh the benefits in our mind.
Understood. So the government is clearly comfortable supporting nuclear with state-backed loans and contract for difference. And this is clear that they don't want to do the same for onshore wind. But let's move to another crucial layer of governance: municipalities. In Sweden, municipalities have veto power over proposed wind farms, and they can exercise it at different stage of development. If I remember correctly, you'll correct me in a minute if you need to. In 2025 alone, around 90% of proposed wind farms were vetoed. Why is municipal opposition so strong right now? And is the central government doing anything concrete to address this?
Well, as you highlighted, the municipality has the veto right, and they can use it pretty much whenever in the process before it's accepted, and that has proven to be quite a difficult path to navigate as a developer, because you could, at first, the municipality could be positive about the development, and then they could quickly change their mind
Hmm.
and veto the project. So that has been an issue, but the government has actually sort of work to tackle this problem. So there is a economic incentive for municipalities with wind power. So we just got the decision 2 days ago that it was going to be paid out here in March and April. So it's just an economic incentive for municipalities in Sweden that do have wind power, and we hope that will strengthen sort of acceptance on the municipal level. So money has been set aside for 2025, 2026, and 2027. And it could be quite a lot of cash for some of the smaller municipalities.
Understood. So we probably are going to see much fewer vetoes for proposed wind farm as of this year already, I suppose. Do you expect the same?
I can be hopeful. I hope that's that effect, but I can't really. I hope that, Giuseppe. Let's end with that.
All right, let's take a pause here and we'll be back in 30 seconds.
Looking to stay ahead in the wind energy sector? Wind Europe's intelligence platform has in-depth statistics, interactive data and maps, policy trackers, and market reports, all updated regularly to keep you informed. Whether you're tracking turbine orders, exploring permitting trends, or diving into national policy development, the platform gives you the insights you need to make smarter decisions. Log in today and unlock the full power of Wind Europe's intelligence tools. Not a member yet? Contact us to find out more.
Welcome back to the Onshore Perspective. Before the break, we talked about slow demand growth, a strong policy focus on nuclear, and municipalities that have been waiting for promised incentives and that looks like they're about to arrive. Now let's move to system operation, which has become a major issue for wind power operators in Sweden. That's because the country recently moved from hourly to 50-minute power balancing, and it introduced a new balancing algorithm, which I believe it applies to the entire Scandinavian power region. So, Anton, what changed, and why has this been so painful for wind operators?
Well, we can start by saying that 2025 meant a lot of changes. So as you mentioned, we went from one delivery period per hour to four. So
Mhm.
just there, it's harder to balance your actual production against the prognosis that you have delivered. So that has meant that you're more keen on you're more often going to be not in balance compared to your prognosis. Furthermore, the algorithm previously was operated by a human, so they could activate the bits. But the algorithm was designed to keep the frequency in the net at 50 hertz. So it did so very well. The sort of balance of the grid has been very accurate since its introduction, but it has also meant that costs relating to sort of mistakes in terms of prognosis and production has been very costly. So we've seen skyrocketing in the imbalance costs, which has become a little bit better during the later stages of 2025, but they were detrimental at the earlier stages in quarter one and quarter two. So yeah.
Understood. So it sounds like it's added complexity and also part of a learning curve that the system as a whole needs to go through before things get better. But I'd like to switch gears now and talk about mis and disinformation. I mean, across Europe, opposition to wind farm is becoming louder, and Sweden is often seen as a country with a high institutional trust and fact-based public debate. Is that still the case when it comes to wind energy? And what are the most common myths or misleading narratives that you're seeing today?
Well, yeah, I mean, in Sweden, we have a very vocal opposition to wind power that has been established and working for quite a few years. So,
Mhm.
so the industry is facing a lot of challenges on that end. And one of the things that has been mentioned a lot of times when it comes to misinformation and disinformation is that of infrasound and wind power.
Mhm.
So, oftentimes these sort of opposition groups are pushing for the fact that wind power produces infrasound that is harmful to humans, and there has yet to be any scientific evidence for this. So that is a very sort of concrete example of how that has been evolving.
Understood. I mean, that's pretty worrying. And with the advent of AI, ill-intentioned actors can now produce misleading content faster and make it look more credible than ever and spread it very quickly through social media. And that's something that the sector and policymakers will need to stay ahead of, I think. And speaking of policymakers, if we look ahead, in a few months, Swedes will head to the polls in a general election that will determine the next government and will probably also shape the future direction of energy policy in Sweden. So, what do the polls suggest right now? And should the onshore wind sectors be cautiously optimistic or carefully reserved about what comes next?
I mean, these polls trying to depict the future results of the polls, I'm very cautious in over analyzing them.
Mm,
I'm cautiously Swedish here. I think we at Green Power Sweden are looking forward to a government that takes renewables seriously and
mhm.
takes their role in the electricity mix seriously and the power system.
Understood. Well, regardless of the governments that will come into place, what would be the policy number one or three top policies that you would like to see implemented by a future government?
I'm just gonna reiterate my previous response here. We're looking forward to a government that takes renewables seriously
Hmm.
and takes their role in the future electricity system seriously. So what I mean by that is we're looking forward to a government that has sort of looking ahead at the future, looking ahead at all the different power sources and how they can contribute, ensuring market competitiveness. I think that are the most important things that we're sort of looking for in a new government.
Understood. Well, Anton, thank you very much. This was a very clear and insightful tour or where Swedish onshore wind stands today and the market realities and the policy choices. So thank you to you. Thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your colleagues, subscribe to the podcast, and let us know which country we should head to next. We'll be back with a new episode next month. And until then, stay curious. Bye.
Bye bye.